Let's
We've
get on
got
with it.
an expert to talk to us today about smoking cessation. He is the guy in the United States who is the prominent expert in everything about nicotine and tobacco and e-cigarettes, vaping. So get your questions out because Dr. Nevin Zablotsky will answer your questions. He is a periodontist by trade. He teaches in a medical and dental school, and we are very lucky to have him here today. Hi, Dr. Zablotsky. I hope it's okay if I call you Nevin.
No, you call me Nevin because we've worked together, and I've even
Yeah,
gone as far as to lecture in Nepal's medical and dental schools. So yeah, it's I've
very
traveled. Yeah,
exciting. So,
yeah,
can you start just by we all know that cigarettes are bad for us,
right,
but
right.
can you go into a little more detail about cigarettes and then move into the vaping and the e-cigs and all that?
You bet. Let's start with cigarettes, and it's fascinating because there's actually a lot of English history related to that. Goes back to James the First, who hated banned production of of growing tobacco because he hated it so much. But then they became the English became dependent on the revenue that generated. Then you have Buck Duke from the United States, who formed a American Tobacco Company. He then joins forces with the Imperial Tobacco Company in like the early 1900s, and that British American Tobacco Company exists now and is a powerhouse worldwide. So that's that. Let's talk a little about prevalence and then we'll go from there because I think it's important to know how prevalent it is. So this is now in the UK. In 1962, 70% of the men and 40% of the women smoked cigarettes. And now it's 11% of people over 18, which is great. But the bad news is 6 million people are still smoking cigarettes and 78,000 people die in the UK every year. Okay. It's costing, and I want to get this number right because I read it and I don't believe it. It's costing 17 billion pounds in revenue every year in England to pay for all the damages that are being done, cost-wise, health-wise, loss of productivity. That's an astounding number.
Right, because they have a social health care system, and anybody suffering from emphysema or lung cancer due to tobacco, and now we've got the whole HPV, but that's
Right.
another
And that's a
area.
whole other story.
Back to tobacco.
Back to
Can
tobacco and
tobacco
cigarettes.
cause can
Yeah,
tobacco cause an HPV? Or
not really. Wait, now one's a virus and the other is more,
unrelated.
yeah,
Okay.
more chemical. But anyway, 90% of the people who get oral cancer, 90% of the people with oral cancer smoke. Okay, that's number one. Even chewing tobacco, high incidence of people getting oral cancer. Um, 30, if you're a heavy user of tobacco and alcohol, 80% chance, higher risk of getting it.
So, in
80%.
other words, if you smoke and drink together, which I think a lot of people do,
Yes.
your risks go up like what, threefold, tenfold?
How about 80%? 80% greater. So
Wow.
you're asking for trouble if you do both of those. You're asking for trouble if you do the smoking anyway. Okay.
Because
So
basically, the smoking impacts all the oral tissue everywhere, even though you just suck it in the center.
yes, yes, it's the exposure in your mouth. Okay. Not to mention how many other cancers. Leading cause of bladder cancer is smoking cigarettes. Who would have ever
Wow.
thought that? Right. So it affects so many organ systems, but lung cancer is the one that we're most concerned about. So now, with that, knowing that, let's go to vaping and e-cigarettes because I know that's on everybody's mind as well.
Yes.
And I'll give you statistics about that, which is okay.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know about secondhand when somebody's vaping next to me. Am I at risk?
You are at risk. Again, the research is so early as far as assessing e-cigarettes, and then we'll talk about nicotine pouches, which is a great concern to me as well. But okay, so here's some numbers about vaping.
Okay.
5.6 million adults over 18 vape, okay, in the
In the
UK.
UK?
As far as 20%, listen to this number because it's frightening. 20% of 11 to 15-year-olds have tried e-cigarettes. Okay? 20%.
Right.
And
So the reason why is it's cool, right? They market it as being like a really cool thing.
yes,
And
yeah,
it looks colorful. It always looks like a crayon box in some cases.
totally. And the thing that's scary to me is I didn't realize they started young in the United States, but that's even younger. And what happens is brothers and sisters give their siblings these products because you're not in England and in the UK, I think it's 18 years old before you can get these products legally. Okay.
Oh,
And just like in the United States, peer pressure, they get it from their friends, then they get addicted because they have no sense of what's going on as far as that being addictive. The other thing is they changed the molecule of nicotine, and this happened with Juul cigarettes. They added benzo. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but they added benzoic acid. What it did is you could increase the concentration tremendously, and it doesn't hurt your throat and it smells great and tastes great. So that was a major big deal. Juul was banned for a while. You can now get it in the UK, and now the FDA in the United States said you can sell it again. So that's very upsetting as well. Ask me more about vaping.
no, that's very upsetting. And why did they ban it and then allow it?
Well, the irony is they
Be-
banned it. Well, what happened is they got
because of the
sued.
big companies that want to make their income?
Well, they banned it because, and they got sued and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the suit. Juul did because they were advertising it to kids and giving free Juul cigarettes away, e-cigarettes away. And then it got banned. And the FDA is not as rigorous as they used to be. And I won't get into why I think that is. But now it's available. And I looked on the UK and it's available, you know, and you can get it online. You probably can even may not even be out just online. Yeah.
Wow.
So vaping's a real problem. And the real problem also, and this is really, again, we can get to England, is there was a group of people, there were 12 people, and I think it was in 2014, they got together at a meeting, and between them, they asked them if you rated how dangerous cigarettes were versus e-cigarettes. Well, they said 100% said it's definitely not safe as far as cigarettes go. And 5% of them said, well, vaping is 5%, safe, unsafe. They came up with these numbers, they just pulled them out. And there was no major research, there's no long-term studies. So the people who actually did that meeting have now backed off, and they backed off relatively quickly and said, well, we didn't know what the long-term effects were, number one. And number two, we were just trying to come up with it. And now that's what is used as the criteria for the comparison of e-cigarette safety versus cigarette safety. And in my opinion, and not just mine, but other scientists, it's bogus. It's bogus. But that's
Can
constantly,
you describe what actually happens in the vaping mechanism?
well, basically, it creates an aerosol. You have an electronic heating device. Basically, it's
An
heating it up.
aerosol, I mean, they don't even let you with aerosols on an airplane. So you're
Right.
saying,
It's an
okay,
aerosol. It's not, they're comparing apples and oranges. It's not smoke. So you have very fine particles, and we don't know if it's safe for secondhand aerosol breathing in. And there's a lot of stuff we just still don't know, but that hasn't stopped the market from going crazy. Because I can give you, oh, and what
and
happened in England is, and now, and a good argument, I understand the argument. There's a lot of people who are addicted to cigarettes, so we want to protect them, so we want them to use e-cigarettes. But
because
there
it would reduce the amount of
and
nicotine
exposure
intake.
and exposure to toxins. Okay. But the bottom line is it's not safe. And they're saying, well, we want to protect the people who are smoking and help them. But the bottom line is you have a whole new generation getting addicted. And then, so what are you weighing? If you could really enforce it and not let kids get access to it, that's one thing. But that's not the case in the United States, and it's not going to be the case there as well.
So what happens? Kids start, and then they need more and more and more nicotine till they're smokers.
And they don't even realize that they're addicted. Yeah, you can go to in the United States because I was part of lobbying to pass a bill to ban this stuff. But anyway, they were going. I was talking to a nurse. She in a high school, and they were finding like 15, 20 girls in the bathroom vaping, and they were doing it all the time. I had to really try to watch what these kids were doing. But but that's enough, I think, to go to e-cigarettes because we only have 10 more minutes.
Okay, well, just could you just describe though the mechanism? So basically, there's a heat element, and it heats up the nicotine, creates this aerosol
And you
that you
inhale it.
breathe.
gets into your lungs, goes, and then what you get is nicotine in your bloodstream, goes through the blood-brain barrier and releases dopamine in the part of your brain that makes you feel good. And that's what it's all about, feeling good. If you didn't get dopamine released because of using these products, you wouldn't use them. Yeah, you wouldn't use
Okay.
them. Okay.
All right. So that's vaping, and
Right. That's
now we're
vaping.
going to go into e-cigarettes. Can you describe the
No,
difference?
that's the same thing. E-cigarettes and
Okay.
vaping. So now let's go to pouches because we saw
Pouches.
nicotine pouches. So nicotine pouches have been around for a while, although now they're really finally making their strides in recently.
Well, so
Um,
the advantage is that you could do it on it. You could have it in your mouth on an airplane, for example, right?
yes,
You
yes,
could
yes.
have it in your mouth at work.
Yes, yes, yes. And I want to give you some numbers as far as pouches go. So, as I said before, there are no regulations in the UK. You could be of any age and buy it, and there's no regulations on the amount of nicotine in these products of the
What?
concentration. Yes, yes. So, a cigarette usually is about 6 milligrams of nicotine, and you really probably get a 1.5 milligrams into your bloodstream and affects your brain. Well, these pouches now run this. So picture a can and it has 20 pouches in it. Okay.
Okay.
Each pouch has a certain amount of milligrams of nicotine.
Okay.
Well, the ones that are most common are Zyn. Okay. And I think that is Philip Morris. Yeah, that's Philip Morris International because they bought out Sweetest Match, who made it initially. And I can go even further back how it all started, but I don't have time. But anyway, so Zin, Velo, and On with an exclamation point, those are the most common. Okay. Now, I think Zin is 3 and 6 milligrams, but you can even find 13.5 milligrams per.
So wait a minute. Can you buy this in a gas station, in a
Yes,
grocery store?
yes.
And there's no regulation. Is that what you're
In the
saying?
United States, there is, but in the UK, I cannot find anything
Not
that's
yet.
not yet. They're going to pass bills, I'm sure. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. But anyway, so get this. So that's 3 to 6 or 8 milligrams in each one of those pouches. It can't
Okay.
come with 20 pouches. Okay. At this point, you can even go online, and I tried to do it, and I think you can. You can get as high as 50 to 150 milligrams per pouch.
And how much is in a cigarette?
One cigarette would give you about 6 milligrams. So that's 120 milligrams for a pack.
Oh my God.
So they're finding now if a little kid gets their hands on that, they'll end up in the emergency room and they have seizures, and this is happening. Now you're getting nicotine poisoning. So it's a real dilemma because it's not regulated. Certainly, I noticed it's not regulated well in Europe, and it is banned in certain countries. But so I worry the most about this is the next step. So you went from cigarettes, which supposedly are terrible for you, and they are, to e-cigarettes, which is the debate is who knows what's going to happen in 15 or 20 years, what they're going to say. And now you're getting pouches and these levels of nicotine are totally frightening. Even with the Zins, which are the three, I thought I saw something online, 13.5, but somebody could go through a can of those products in one day. That's a hell of a lot of nicotine, and we have no idea what that. Oh, and I forgot. I'm glad I just thought of it. So the as your brain develops, okay, up until the age of 25, you're seeing prefrontal cortex damage in kids who are exposed to those levels of nicotine. Okay, that's its behavior and its cognition. Those are all impaired, and the problem is the as you get into your early 20s, that's when that part of your brain's finishing its development.
Right.
So if they're exposed to that much nicotine, that's really, and you're going to have a whole bunch of kids that are going to be messed up as adults because of what they're doing now. And it's not their fault because they have no clue what they're doing. They're just doing what their peers are telling them to do. And it gets cool and then it's addictive and they have no control over what's going on. And we have people who do smoking cessation and they don't know how to handle 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and
Okay. So if
15-year-olds.
somebody has a pouch and they go to a dental hygiene appointment,
Yeah, I didn't even get to that.
can you
Yeah.
tell that their skin
Yes.
is
Yeah, they're starting to see irritate, even with vaping, they're starting to see irritations of the inside of the oral mucosa, tongue. But it's certainly nicotine pouches, they're really seeing it because you're leaving it in your mouth. You're leaving it in your mouth. So we don't know if it's going to cause oral cancer or not. There's a very reasonable chance it could, when you
How
chew,
long do people leave? How long until they
they could
get
leave it,
all of that
they,
nicotine? A
they could
couple
do that. Well,
hours?
they could be using it during the day, hours on end, leaving it in their mouth.
But does that mean it continually gives them the effects?
It
If it's
doesn't, probably after a while, you
mm,
start using up whatever was in there. Yeah.
right.
But it's long-term leaving it in your mouth. That's the dilemma. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a problem.
that is
And,
frightening. I'd like
yeah.
to open this up to the chat. If anybody has any questions, please put it in there.
And I want to
I mean,
talk about the end game also. And
yeah,
one
otherwise
last,
let's keep going. I want to know, what is the UK going to do about this
well,
rising problem?
here's the good news. Okay, here's the good news, and I want to make
Woo,
sure I get this accurate. Okay. I want to get an accurate comment. Okay, so here's the UK because I did some research. They're getting close to passing the end game. Now, what the end game means is you will not let anybody born after a certain date purchase any nicotine and tobacco product. Okay, that's the end game. So the UK is on the verge of becoming one of the first countries to implement this generational ban. Here's the good news.
really?
This is last year and into this year. The House of Commons voted 415 to 47, okay, uh, in favor of the end game, and the King of England has now supported it. So there's a reasonable chance that you can protect this next generation. And the argument from the tobacco companies should be, yes, they said they know it's dangerous, they want to eliminate cigarettes. Well, if you really feel that way, then wouldn't you want, and you're not saying you can't smoke if you're over a certain age or use these products. We're saying this next generation we're protecting. So what's the argument against that? Okay, now you can, I think we still have a couple of minutes for questions.
Yeah. So I don't see any questions in the chat. How, so the nicotine patches are fairly
Pouches,
small, like pouches.
pouches,
Pouches,
about that big. Can
they're
you see?
about that big. All of them are about that size.
Yeah, they're all about the same size. Yeah. And you just leave it you park it in your mouth and you leave it there. And you just leave it there and it gets absorbed through your oral mucosa and into your bloodstream and up to your brain.